I'm Elif Shafak. I'm a Turkish writer, a novelist, I'm a storyteller. I write fiction in two languages, both Turkish and English. I commute between languages, the way I commute between cities and cultures, and that's an important part of my personal story. I'm not a big believer in these categories of highbrow fiction, lowbrow art. I don't like genres, categorical thinking. For me, fiction is more fluid. What I'm interested in is stories. As long as it's a good story, it could take place in the past, it could be a contemporary story, it could be with Turkish connections, it could be much more universal. The main thing is, for me, the power of the story itself, the charm of the story itself. So I do not like to place myself in any box or category. I want to see myself as only a storyteller. That said, there's a metaphor that Rumi used centuries ago. He was talking about living like a drawing compass. And as you know, one leg of the drawing compass is static, is rooted, fixed almost, based somewhere. And the other leg is drawing a huge wide circle around it. Sometimes I think my fiction is like that. My writing is like that too. One part of it is based in Istanbul or Turkey, where I come from. But the other leg, in the meantime, is drawing a huge wide circle. So in my opinion, it's possible to be local and universal, to belong somewhere, but at the same time be a universal citizen or a global soul. These are themes that I care about enormously. I also write extensively about minorities, but I define the word minority in the broadest sense possible. So it could be sexual minorities, ethnic minorities, cultural minorities, anyone for any reason who felt like the other in a particular framework. I'm interested in their stories. I try to give more voice, if I may put it that way, to those people who have been pushed to the periphery. So I like to follow their stories and bring back to the center. Coming from Turkey, I have observed this tradition of father novelists. The genre of the novel came to Turkey relatively late, and it is the youngest literary genre. For instance, poetry is quite old, but compared to that, the novel is very young. It came directly from Europe. And the early novelists, who were late Ottoman intellectuals, almost always used this as an instrument to teach their readers something, to guide their readers. So in a way, they presumed that they were somewhere above their readers. This invisible hierarchy between writer and reader has always been there. In fact, they have seen themselves as the fathers of their readers, and their readers as their sons in need of guidance. I do not feel close to this tradition at all. I write with my intuition, my instinct. Most of the time when I'm writing, I'm a bit drunk. I don't know what I'm doing. I like it when the story surprises me. So for me, this is not a rational engineering, where the writer is in control of things. To be honest, I don't think we're in control of anything. What guides us is the power of the story, and there we're all equal. Both the writer and the reader. We're all operating on equal level, and what connects us is the story. So I do like to challenge or question this role that is attributed to the novelist. That said, at the same time, I'm aware that coming from Turkey as a writer, I don't have the luxury of being apolitical. I don't think any writer coming from countries with wobbly democracies, like Egypt, like Pakistan, like Nigeria, we don't have the luxury of saying, I'm not interested in politics. So there is that, maybe there's a political dimension to my work as well. But again, coming from feminist movement, I define politics in a very, very broad way. For me, politics is not only about the parliament or political parties, it's also about gender relations, it's also about sexual relations. The private space is also political. So I like to question things and leave the answers to the readers. In all honesty, I love coming to Edinburgh. Every event that I've come here for, I enjoyed it tremendously. Also the connection with the readers, with the audience, the questions they ask, both during the event but also afterwards, during book signing, the comments they make, the feedback they bring, that's very, very precious for me, and I'm very happy to be here again.
Today's event was more to do with me wanting to attend and see Elif. I've read a book, and there's a character in the book called Shams. He meets Rumi. Rumi used to be a scholar back in the days, and when he meets Shams, he turns into a poet, and he's one of the greatest poets of the 15th century or the 16th century. So the idea was for me to meet Elif and probably thank her for the fact that, in a way, I feel liberated, and it made me start writing. And also, the good thing was it was a good topic, translation. I come from an Indian background. I've studied in India. Although I've studied English, you always have that heavy baggage of the other languages that you converse in, and English never is your first language. Although now, as the authors talked about it during the whole show, as to how it becomes a subconscious effort for them to start conversing in English and start dreaming in English and start using English as a way of expressing certain emotions, I feel more connected to English now than the languages I've been born and bred in. So when I talk to my mum, I still talk to her in Gujarati, which is a local Indian regional language, but I still feel that I can't really express myself to her anymore the way I can when I'm writing or conversing in English. So it was an important thing for me to sort of get an idea as to how authors that do write a lot of books get to go past that barrier of multiple or bilanguage, or being bilingual or multilingual. This was a good exercise for me, and I write. So again, it helped. And then talking to these guys while I was signing the book was a good process. Yeah, so got my copy signed. I tend to only write in English now. I've never really tried writing Hindi after I left India 12 years ago. So it's really not been, unless I have to sort of maybe try and be cryptic in front of someone or want to give a cryptic message to someone, I may just write in Hindi to be a bit notorious, but I've never really written any other language apart from English. So yeah, I think probably that answers the question in a way. I find him very eloquent. I find him, he's got a good sense of humour, and I guess when he talks and when he writes, I've read a few bits that he's written, and just was reading a couple of pages of his books, and I relate to him more in the way I write, so that's why I picked up his first book. I didn't know which one to pick up, so I thought, okay, the ones that's been shortlisted for the Book Award, National Book Award, I thought, yeah, I'll pick it up. I would for now just give a sole credit to, I'm not necessarily, in terms of my way of writing, I feel that I'm not really mirrored or copied anyone, but in terms of the inspiration to start writing, pretty much came after I read Alif's book called 40 Rules of Love. As I said to you about the character, where he's a very strong character, the main protagonist is called Shams, and when he meets a scholar, he turns him into a poet and a philosopher instead of a boring person who keeps on giving and dishing out lectures. And that probably was the moment when I picked up the pen and started writing, and then the poetry started flowing. At the moment I don't share my poetry with anyone, but I guess it's only getting better, and hopefully with time I will. So I wouldn't really say I feel close or attached to a certain author, but I would say that she triggered the writing in me through her protagonist. I still feel more comfortable writing when I know. Maybe once I've exhausted or once I've bored myself to death writing about the character that I know, probably that's when I'm going to start going out there and exploring new characters. For now, I haven't necessarily drained out my emotions in terms of my writing, in my writing, so I really want to try and do that. It's about emptying the emotions that I have, the characters that are in my mind, the personalities that I feel attached to or relate to. I want to try and write about those. Maybe once I'm done with those, maybe I can explore. But for now, I can't really relate to that emotion of going and venturing out in the open and probably picking up Chinese peasant or a Norwegian scholar for that matter. I feel for me it's all about Oasis for now, and the characters he attaches himself to. So I'm a marketeer, I can write about that. I have an Islamic background, I can write about that. I've lived in Bombay in a city where I've seen the rich and the poor, I can write about that. So for now my vision is quite restricted, all the coming here. I can write about how an immigrant lives in London, I can write about that and I can relate to that, but I can't necessarily relate to how Prince George is living in the Windsor Castle for now. I think, yeah, as they spoke about it, it's such an enriching experience for you to get acclimatized to or accustomed to a foreign culture, which you wouldn't necessarily see in a book written by someone in a native or a native English author, not a native Scottish author. So I think it's a great thing. I mean, I read a lot of Indian authors, and I've started reading Scottish authors myself. So I think it's very important that the world truly becomes a global place, and translating, I think, is the best way to sort of try and open those horizons rather than be restricted and closed and say, right, for England it's only English and for India it's only Indian. Probably that's not the way. I think translating is just the best tool.
I'm very interested in people who write in different languages. I write in English and German, and I'm interested in the creative process of how you decide what language you write in. And I thought I might get some insight into two people who do that. I thought Elif talked a lot about the creative process, which was interesting. I could talk to her probably for hours about it, about exactly where my problems are and different narrative voices. One of the things is deciding beforehand whether or not you write in a particular language. It's happened to me before that I've started. When I went to live in Berlin about 11 years ago, and I wanted to write something about the city because it really impressed me. And although I'd lived there before, but it had changed a lot. I've moved there, away from there before the wall fell, and moved back after the wall fell. So that was really interesting, and I wanted to write something. And I started writing in English, and it didn't catch. And so then I thought, well, I'll try German because I'm fluent in German. And I noticed I had a completely different narrative voice, and that was just really interesting for me. It was really surprising. Very interesting, I thought, was about people who are not native English speakers, which I am, but non-native English speakers who are changing the English language because it's quite this cultural imperialism of English. I don't like that, and I think this idea of not surrendering to the English language, but actually taking it for yourself and doing something with it, and using your language and saying, this is how, and that's, Aleksandar said something about somebody saying, that's not how we say it, and he said, yes, it is now. I thought that was really interesting. I think it's important for Anglo-Saxons to realise there are cultures other than their own.